Hello, how are you? I'm Rhiannon, owner of the Epsom Bakehouse, coming on today to talk about whether you can substitute ingredients when you're baking bread at home. So do say hi if you're watching or if you are have any bread making questions. Just joining me today in my kitchen. I'm doing a little bit of prep here, so I thought I'd come on and talk about this one today. Doing some prep for my class with my membership actually later this week, and that is my monthly membership where we bake different breads every time. So I know this doesn't look much like bread making ingredients, but I am slicing up some tomatoes for roasting. So I'm about to roast these in the oven and get them really deeply roasted down and make a puree, because that's going to go into my bread as a flavour. So talking about making substitutions, so if you're joining today, do let me know if you're got any questions about substituting ingredients when you're baking bread. And probably some of the most common ones, I'll talk about some of the most common ones, but can be a little bit difficult, and some of the issues you might face when you're trying to substitute ingredients when you're baking bread. So let me know if you've got any questions. Also this week, got Father's Day coming up on Sunday, and if you have a dad or someone in your life who'd like to buy a gift for on Father's Day, who really is into baking or perhaps wants to get into bread baking, then do check out the description below this. You can get a link there to my storefront. Is an affiliate link. You can get a link to my top picks for gifts for bread bakers, and especially dads who might like to get into bread baking. So do check that out. All right. Try not to slice my fingers off, but yeah, joining me today, it's a little bit cool and a bit overcast. I'm still waiting for that sunshine to come back and show us, probably what June is meant to be. So just doing this. If you're wondering why I'm chopping up tomatoes, that's because I'm making a roasted tomato puree to go into a bread that I am baking with my membership, the Bakehouse Club, this weekend. Looking forward to baking that. We do a different bread every month, so it's a really fantastic one, and you get access as well to all the previous ones that we've done. So lots of people baking bread with me, and we get all these recipes. You can come along and do it live or watch it on catch up. Oh, look, they look fantastic. I'm going to be roasting these down with a bit of salt and pepper. Just pop them onto the tray. So talking today about substitutions, can you substitute? I'm just seeing a few people joining. Someone saying, what am I cooking? I'm like I say, I'm just baking these tomatoes. I'm just going to roast them with a bit of seasoning and olive oil, and I'll be making a puree to go into a bread. I'm baking that with my membership club on Sunday. On Saturday. So we do a live monthly class, and this is the bread we're baking. It's going to have this roasted tomato puree amongst other things, spices, and cheddar. It's going to be really delicious summer bread. So they look great. I'm going to pop those into the oven. I'm going to make a puree out of them to make into the bread. So hi, lovely to have you along. Hi, Jelly01. It's lovely to see you, and thanks for joining me. I am going to talk a little bit about substitutes as well in your bread baking. So if you've got any questions, I'm just going to talk about that a little bit whilst I'm making these. Do let me know if you've got any questions. I'm totally guesstimating. I'm meant to be doing about 200 grams of these, so I'm totally guesstimating how much I'll need. Let's do one more. Chop them up. So hi, thank you for joining me, and I'm Rhiannon, and so thank you for joining me and baking along. So if you're baking bread at home, let me just get my seasonings. So if you're baking bread at home and you suddenly think perhaps you've not got the ingredients, can you make any substitutes? So that is what is being asked today. Can you make any substitutes when you're baking bread at home? And the basic ingredients, you might be able to see my little sign over here. I always have this up in my classes. So So it's flour, water, salt, and yeast. And actually, some of those aren't even the basic ingredients, because you can make bread with just 2 ingredients. So it can be even more basic than that. Thank you for subscribing, Ellie. That's really kind. Yeah, do hit subscribe if you're interested in more bread making tips. I appreciate I'm not bread baking right now. I am about to start roasting these tomatoes. Let's just mix those up and pop them in the oven. But if you'd like more bread baking tips, do subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of videos there. So you're making bread, and it's usually with these basic ingredients of flour, water, salt, yeast, some of them. Can you substitute any of the ingredients? So let's just talk about a few of the things that are in there. So the flour, you might be using a bread flour. So it could be a wheat bread flour. And that flour contains protein. And if it's a white flour or a plain flour, or it depends how you describe it where you are, you might call it an all-purpose flour with a higher protein content, but generally a white bread flour, so no outer bran. So you think of a grain of wheat, it has this shell, a hard shell outside that protects this kind of spongy interior. So the spongy interior makes the white flour, and the bran on the outside is kept in if you want wholemeal or whole grain flour. So the difference being that with wholemeal flour, it does require a lot more water. So if you're using a whole grain flour, it will require a lot more water in the mixture. So I find when people come to me and they say, oh, I just ran out of white bread flour, I ran out of that plain bread flour that I was using, the not wholemeal one, and I just threw in some wholemeal or whole grain flour, and it just turned out awfully. Usually that is because if you stick with the recipe that you had, and yeah, it can be, maybe you don't think it's a laughing matter, someone was just saying laughing, it can be a laughing matter afterwards, but when the bread turns out not how you're expecting, it can be a bit of a disappointment. But bear in mind that if you use a whole grain flour, a wholemeal flour, it needs lots and lots more liquid, because the outer shell of the wheat requires lots and lots of more water. It requires lots of water, it will absorb lots more water, and it'll just make your dough really dry. So if you're going to substitute, yes, you can substitute in the whole grain flour for white flour if that's what you've got, but do remember that you're going to add a lot more liquid to your dough, and it really is a lot more. So with white flour, I might use, say, 60 to 70% of the flour weight in water. So for every 100 grams, use at least kind of 65, 70 grams of water. That can go up to kind of 80 to 85 grams of water per 100 grams of wholemeal. So lots different in the amount of liquid that you need to add. So bear that in mind if you are substituting your flours. All right, let me just pop these into the oven. Get those roasting. All right, let me know if there's any other substitutions that you might want to make when you're baking bread at home. So, or if you've got any other bread making questions. So I'm just making a bread, testing out a bread recipe today to make a delicious tomato, paprika and cheddar bread with my membership, the Bakehouse Club, this weekend. So that's going to be a really delicious bake. Just roasting the tomatoes to let them sit and get into a puree, and that will go into my bread. So you can actually add lots of things into your bread like that to give flavour. All right, so substituting flour, just talked about that. We're substituting ingredients in flour. The other way that you might substitute flour is if you think you've got a totally different type of flour. So your recipe is saying wheat, can you substitute in other bread flours or other flours like rye, or perhaps a gluten-free flour? And unfortunately at this point, the answer is generally not really, only because they have really different properties. So if you substituted in rye for wheat flour, you'll find that you'll make a totally different dough. So your rye flour has not as much gluten in. It will make a very, very different dough, very sloppy, and you will not get the bread you were expecting. Obviously, rye bread turns out a lot more differently. That being said, if you want to use some rye in your wheat bread, you could put in, say, up to 10% of your flour weight of rye. So perhaps substitute in like 50 grams if you're using 500 grams of wheat flour. Substitute in about 50 grams of rye. It'll add a really nice distinct flavour to your final loaf, and it won't really affect how your dough turns out. The other big substitution that you might be wondering about when you're baking bread is for the yeast. So you might have yeast a bit like this, and dried yeast. And what do you do if perhaps that yeast isn't working anymore and you really want to bake bread? Or if your yeast, you just don't have any and you've run out of yeast and you think, can I still make bread? Well, there's plenty of quick breads that you can make, like soda bread, and do check out the channel and do subscribe. There's videos, long videos, and also shorts on this channel that you can check out and find out more about baking things like soda bread. And those are traditionally made with baking soda, or bicarbonate of soda, so something like this. So it's just this baking soda. When you put this into liquid, and particularly like an acidic liquid, so if you add in something like yogurt, like acidified dairy products, so yogurt, or you add in milk and maybe some lemon juice or vinegar, don't worry, you won't get the taste, that will cause this to fizz. So it will have this reaction and it will produce gas. So that has the same, it does the same thing almost as yeast, but it is going to produce a very different type of bread. It won't produce a lovely risen, softer loaf of bread. It produces a slightly different bread. It's a slightly different texture. So don't think it's going to turn out like yeasted bread. It's still a really delicious, quick bread, but slightly denser, and you have lots of flavour. And you might get some flavour from the baking soda as well, from the bicarbonate of soda. So you can try it out and try quick bread instead of using the yeast. The one thing to remember is that term quick, that when you add in the liquid and you add in the bicarbonate of soda, once that those two have reacted together, that's it. The reaction runs out and no more gas is produced. So once you've mixed up your dough, and if you're using a quick bread recipe like a soda bread, it goes straight into the oven. You need it to get risen and baked as quickly as possible. It's not just going to keep on rising. Like with a yeasted bread, that rises for much longer time. It takes a lot more time. Eventually the yeast will run out of food. They won't be able to get any more access to any more of the flour in the dough, and they'll run out of food and stop producing gas, but that does take a much longer time. So just bear that in mind. So you'll make a very different bread if you substitute in bicarbonate of soda. It'll still be delicious, but it will be very different texture. It will be very different to that one that you might have made with yeast. So bear that in mind. The other thing you also have is baking powder, slightly different to bicarbonate of soda. This is also can just be added into water. So it's got kind of cream of tartar in it as well, we might call it that. So it's got raising agents in it, and when you add it into water, again, it produces gas, but it's a very short reaction. So again, that's going to be a quick bread. You're going to put it straight into the oven, and you'll find it has a slightly different kind of closer texture, and you might not get that taste where what is happening with the yeast is they're digesting down the starches as well in your bread and producing lots and lots of flavour. So it does actually alter the flavour of your finished bread slightly. All right, so that was two of the main substitutions that I hear about in my classes. People asking, can I substitute in different flours and also substitutes for yeast? So if you've got any other substitutes you're thinking about, then do let me know. The other one to mention with the flour is obviously switching between things like wheat flour, which contain gluten, and also gluten-free flours. If the only flour you have available is gluten-free flour, then you'll need to do a very different recipe than if you were using a flour containing gluten like wheat flour. because you need to make a slightly different approach to your dough with gluten-free flour to kind of make a substitute for that gluten. Obviously, you want it to be gluten-free, and you'll need to have something in there that's going to create the structure. So often that is something like potentially eggs, or things like psyllium husks to produce binding to your final bread that you turn out. So it's a little bit more, a very different approach to making a gluten-containing bread. So I would not suggest certainly substituting straight a gluten-free flour for a gluten-containing flour and thinking that your dough will end up the same. You definitely need to slightly switch the method that you have. So I think a lot of this has been that if you have different ingredients, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. You can still bake some really delicious baked goods, but you are going to have to switch your method. So it might mean that you slightly change the recipe. You take a different tact and say, oh, okay, I've run out of yeast. I'm going to be baking a quick bread today using no yeast. I can still bake bread using no yeast. You can make things like flatbreads, soda breads, quick breads, all really delicious. Just bear in mind, it's going to have a little different technique. And if you're using different flours, then again, make sure you're searching for recipes that have those specific flours within them. So for example, I think on here I've got a video about how to get the best bake with wholemeal flours, and you can check that video out because it is a slightly different technique as well. So I think that is more about the adaptability of when you are baking bread at home. Just think, is this recipe going to work with the ingredients I've got? There's definitely something you can be doing, and to make that work with your ingredients. Right, if you didn't join at the start of this live, I'm just roasting some tomatoes. They've got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to see what they're looking like, but I'm roasting some cherry tomatoes to go in bread. As a flavour, obviously, I'm making this roasted tomato and cheddar and paprika bread with my membership at the weekend. So we're really looking forward to baking that with my membership club. We do a different bread every week going into the summer months, doing some breads that are perhaps a bit more summer flavours, using up that summer glut of delicious vegetables as well. You can put those into bread. I'm just going to see how they're doing. Going to give that a few more minutes to carry on, and I was going to start weighing out the ingredients for this bread. So if you're watching, also if you are watching as well, and you're thinking you've got perhaps you're thinking about Father's Day as well. It's coming up on Sunday here in the UK and elsewhere. If you're thinking, oh, you want to buy something for a dad that enjoys bread baking, then do check out the link in the description. It's my storefront with my top picks for bread baking Father's Day gifts. That is an ad and an affiliate links, so you can check that out if you want to find anything more about some top picks for those gifts. And I'll probably do a live a little bit later this week as well about some of those things that are on there, and some suggestions for baking bread. But if you have any questions about it, if you're thinking, oh, what is the kind of thing that you might need when you're baking bread, and some really handy and nice to have things as well, because you can bake bread with simple equipment. But if someone you know enjoys bread baking, perhaps if that's a dad or someone you'd like to buy a gift for Father's Day, and you're thinking, oh yeah, that person can really enjoy baking bread and I want to get them something special, there's a couple of suggestions, a few suggestions. I think it's about 15 or 16 things on there. It's on my storefront, the link is in the description, and find out a bit more about what I'd suggest if you're going to buy a gift for someone who enjoys baking bread at home. So that is on there as well. All right, well, if you've joined us today, we've been talking about substitutes in bread baking and how it's all about adapting, and I feel like it's a kind of recipe for life really, but about adapting your recipe to the ingredients you have. What can you make? You might just have to change tack slightly and go on a different route if you've got slightly different ones. So let me know if you've got any questions about substituting ingredients in bread baking. I'm just testing out a recipe at the moment for this roasted tomato, cheddar and paprika bread that I'm baking this weekend. So I'm going to start making up the dough in a little bit. Been chatting away to you as well. It's been fantastic this morning. Really enjoyed chatting away and finding out a bit more. Let me know if you're watching and you've got any bread making questions. I've been enjoying answering the questions that have come up on here. And talking today about some common themes that come up when people are trying to substitute ingredients on their bread making. So perhaps not substituting flours, but going off and trying a different bread. All the while, it's still a bit gloomy here where I am, and just trying to urge the sun to come out. And I think as soon as it does, I'll be talking about how to bake bread in the summer months, because it can be quite warm and it's not something perhaps you want to be spending lots of time doing in front of the oven. Right, I'm going to put some salt in here. Weigh that in. And do subscribe as well if you are enjoying the bread making tips. You can hit subscribe and you'll get more bread making tips straight into your feed. You'll see some of the videos I've got on here. I was just talking about if you're substituting wholemeal flour for white bread flour, how to adapt your recipe for that. And there is a video as well dealing specifically with that on my channel as well. You can go and check out the tips there for perhaps substituting those breads. All right, I'm just waiting as well. If you've not been watching earlier, I'm just roasting some tomatoes in the oven and waiting for those to be done. I want them really roasted down and nice and sweet, and perhaps more concentrated, because I'm going to puree those up to go into a loaf later on. That's a really delicious addition, especially if you've got lots of summer fruits or vegetables. They can be really a great addition to your breads that you bake over this time of year. Well, if it's the summer months, I appreciate it. It's not for everyone, but it is here. So using up those summer vegetables in lots and lots of different dishes, but also in breads. It's a really delightful one to do. All right, well, I am going to go back and finish making up this loaf. And it's been great to answer your questions today, and hopefully be back on very soon. Just mentioning that probably come on and do a live again a little bit later in the week about if you are looking for gifts for Father's Day. You've got a dad or someone you'd like to buy a gift for on Father's Day who's really into baking. Perhaps they'd like to start baking bread. You can check out the link in the description of this live that is an ad or affiliate links for my Amazon storefront, and check out some of my top picks there for gifts for Father's Day as well. Some really great ones there if someone you know is getting into bread baking, and do check that out if you're interested in finding out more. But otherwise, I'm going to go finish off making this bread, and I'll be back again very soon to discuss more bread baking and bread making tips. So let me know if you've got any questions. But otherwise, I will say bye for now.